This is a Gear Network production.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy, Mr. Perez, and you're listening to the Better Live Than Dead podcast, brought to you exclusively on Gear Network. Listen in.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Ryan Wolf joining you here on the 8th episode of the Better Live Than Dead podcast, and let me tell you what, we've got a great podcast lined up for you this week. First, joining us to talk some hockey will be Greg Wyshynski, the editor of the Puck Daddy blog over at Yahoo Sports. Then after that, Perez will join the podcast. We're going to talk some football, and we're going to make our picks for the week. But first, we got to throw a few shout-outs to our sponsors, the people that help keep the lights on and help keep this podcast free. So stick around after these commercial breaks for more of the Better Live Than Dead podcast. While you're listening to this podcast, make sure you follow us on social media. You can follow me at WolfSHC on Twitter. You can also follow Mr. Perez at MRLGPerez. Make sure to like the podcast on Facebook. That's facebook.com/BLTD Podcast. And make sure to follow Gear Network on Twitter at GERE Network.
Wrestling fans, this is JC Money here, and I want to talk wrestling with you. That's right. I want to talk WWE with you. I want to talk indies with you. I want to talk WWE 2K video games. I want to talk anything wrestling with you because we are talking wrestling with JC Money. Thursdays on the Gear Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Better Live Than Dead podcast. Joining us on the line right now, the editor of the Puck Daddy blog on Yahoo Sports and the co-host of the popular podcast Merrick vs. Wyshynski, which can be heard on iTunes. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are joined now by Greg Wyshynski. How you doing today, Greg?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Had a big live fantasy hockey broadcast last night on Yahoo and NHL.com, and it worked out well, and so I'm in a real sort of hockey mindset now because of that show.
I'll say I'm glad because for me, being a Buffalo Sabres fan, and we'll get to this a little later in the podcast, but being a Sabres fan, it's coming along. I guess I'll say I'm still getting caught back up into the hockey thing. I'm sure it'll happen soon. But right now, I'm just kind of like, I really like the whole not hockey thing going on.
Well, it's funny. Like when I was in Buffalo, I did that story on the players and whether they're actually going to tank for Connor McDavid or not. I was interested in talking to a lot of the fans, and the vibe I got was like Buffalo fans by and large don't want the team to be terrible, but Buffalo fans by and large don't want the team to be all that good, so there's still a chance of getting the top 2 pick. But Buffalo fans really, really want the Islanders to be terrible. Is that pretty much your mindset coming into this season? Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, we're to the point now where if the Sabres aren't going to be completely terrible, I mean, even if the Sabres are the worst team in hockey, because last year they set some records being bad, as you know. But if the Islanders are terrible, it'll make everything so much better just because we can laugh at Garth Snow.
That's true.
If he's incompetent, we get to enjoy it in Buffalo. But looking at the NHL here right now, I want to ask you, with the recent developments in Columbus with the injuries and just everything is going downhill there, are the Blue Jackets completely in trouble if they don't re-sign Ryan Johansson?
They're in a bit of trouble. I mean, that losing your entire first line heading into the season is sort of problematic. I mean, the good news obviously being that Jenner's going to get back at some point. Horton is problematic because of his back. That might be something that you can't even control anymore. And then the Johansson thing is sticky. Like, yeah, you want to have your best offensive player on the roster in order to ensure that you're going to be a contender this season, but you can't do it at the price of overpaying for a player who hasn't earned it yet. So, I mean, I think, Kekalainen and John Davidson are both in sort of a spot now because they know essentially their team needs goals. They know essentially that they're going to need top-line players in order to compete in the East in the first 2 months of the season. But I respect them for sticking to their guns. I think that Johansson and his agent have been acting really irresponsibly insofar as what they've been asking for this negotiation, and I respect the Blue Jackets for sticking to their guns.
And continuing to look at the Eastern Conference now, obviously in the West, you look at it, it starts with the Blackhawks and the Kings and everybody else. But in the Eastern Conference, things are kind of muddled. Do you expect the conference to stay kind of wide open, or do you expect a few teams to kind of stick out like the Blackhawks and Kings do in the West?
No, I think in the East you are looking at about 5 teams that you could probably pencil in at this point into the playoffs, and they're Boston, Montreal, Tampa in the Atlantic. I think are all 3 teams that I expect to be in, and then the Rangers and the Penguins over in the Metropolitan. I think you can pencil in as being playoff teams. So that brings you down to 3 spots that are kind of open. And that's where things get really interesting. I mean, I haven't made any official pick yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards the idea of 5 teams coming out of the Metro and 3 teams coming out of the Atlantic. I think the Devils are going to get back in. You look at why they didn't make it last season. It was giving too many starts to Marty Brodeur and being abjectly terrible in the shootout. The shootout's a cyclical thing, and the fact that they're going to give Corey Schneider 60, 65 starts, I think, is going to make them a playoff team. And they'll figure out some sort of offensive concoction with all the old checks that they have up front to find some goals. And then, you look at the Blue Jackets, you look at the Islanders, those 2 teams that I think are going to be on the bubble or near it. I think the Flyers are not going to make the playoffs, and I'd be surprised if maybe things didn't go real south for them in an attempt to try to grab either Eichel or McDavid. And then the team that I think is going to really rebound for a playoff spot are the Capitals. I mean, the Capitals are an extraordinarily talented team. I think we're all hesitant to see exactly what the offense is going to look like with Barry Trotz there, especially with Ovechkin not necessarily going to get the same level of points that he had maybe under Adam Oates. But defensively, and especially with Braden Holtby, they're going to be a lot better. And that team's greatest failing was the complete inability to play 5-on-5 last year, which I think Trotz is going to be able to remedy.
Now, looking over the Western, I did mention the Western Conference before, but the one thing that's been kind of interesting to me in the offseason when I read all the predictions from all the big sports writers throughout the National Hockey League, a lot of people think the Colorado Avalanche are going to regress. Do you believe that will happen, or do you think they're still going to be a top team in the West?
I think it's natural that they'll regress only because they played so far above their heads last season, especially on the blue line, which I'm not enamored with on that team. And Varlamov really being just a revelation, and we don't exactly know if he's going to have the same kind of numbers this year. But, I mean, the idea that the 112-point team can all of a sudden plummet out of the playoffs, it's hard to imagine, especially when they're that good up front. And I think the goaltending will still be all right. So I think Colorado's still a playoff team. If anybody leaves the top 6, or I'm sorry, the top 8 in the West, it's going to be either one of the wild card teams, Dallas or Minnesota. And I'm kind of going back and forth as to which team I think might drop out. Dallas, I want to believe, is going to be even better than they were last year with the maturation of Ben and Sagan, with the addition of Hemsky and the addition of Spezza. Minnesota's goaltending situation gives me pause and makes me think that they're going to struggle. But then you look at what that team did last year. Their point total was pretty impressive versus Dallas's, and their top 6 is ridiculous right now with the addition of Vanek. So I don't know. I feel like if anybody's going to get invited to the dance, it's going to be over one of the wild card teams last year, because the top 6 in the West, I can't even imagine any of those teams dropping out.
Now, again, if you're just joining us right now, we've got the editor of the Puck Daddy blog on Yahoo Sports, Greg Wyshynski, joining us on the phone. And now, Greg, I want to move over to the Buffalo Sabres that we talked about before. Looking at the Sabres, they did make some moves in the offseason. They certainly upgraded the team, but do you still expect them to struggle this season, even with the offseason additions?
I do. I mean, their goaltending for me is extraordinarily problematic. I'm not an Enroth guy, and I covered Neuwirth in Washington, and he'll have fits and spurts of potential, but overall isn't really a goalie that I trust on a regular basis. So it's from that point out, it's a bit of a struggle, I think, for them. But at the same time, the idea that you've added a number of veteran guys that clearly aren't going to be in for folding, I think is a good thing. I mean, you bring a guy like Josh Jorgensen, who's ridiculously competitive, ditto Gianta, ditto Molson. The idea that these veteran guys sign up to be on this team and all of a sudden are expected to lose, I don't think really computes. So I do think that they might be able to internalize all this stuff, all these expectations, guys like me coming to their camp and asking if they're going to tank for a teenager, and use it as a rallying point for the season. The potential's there for them to be a bit better than people think they are, but I can't imagine that they're going to be anything more than second to last in their division.
I mean, the craziest thing about that, just kind of taking a look back, is that if think about it, I've seen a couple people say, the Sabres will probably score 30, 35 more goals this season, but that still puts them, if it was compared to last season, it would still put them in the bottom of the league. And if they win, even if they get 10 more points, they're still in the bottom of the league. That's how bad last year was, and you don't really realize it until you put it into perspective.
Right. It's the same thing with Edmonton over in the West. Like, if Edmonton improved by 25 points from after last season, like if they were 25 points better this season, that still puts them, I think, a point out of the wild card based on last year's points, or a point ahead, somewhere in that regard. So it's tough to dig out of those holes. I mean, the Colorado Avalanches of the world are not the norm, teams that can turn it around the way that they did. So you're right. I mean, even a massive improvement puts them still just raises them from abjectly terrible to mediocre. But the thing about it, though, in the Eastern Conference is that it's the East, and like I said, outside of those 5 teams, and maybe even you have question marks about Pittsburgh with the new coach and with Malkin, being hurt and not having any line mates. Outside of those 5 teams, it's a complete crapshoot, and there could be someone who rises up that we don't anticipate to grab a playoff spot.
Now, I know it's a little early. The National Hockey League season hasn't started yet, but there's one thing that just did pop in my mind, and while I've got you on the phone, I do want to ask you about it. Bobby Ryan just got a big contract extension in Ottawa, which obviously lessens the market just that much more. And like I said, I know it's only October, but do you think that that Drew Stafford will be a very, very hot name at the trade deadline this season?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine he's going to be available. I don't know if they're going to bring him back or if he wants to come back. But, it's going to be a case where there aren't going to be a whole lot of the guys available in theory. And Stafford's a guy who I think teams would like to add. He's got some attributes that could definitely improve somebody's third line, second line, that sort of thing. But the thing about the trade deadline versus, say, free agency is that it really does depend on everybody's lot in life. If teams that we expected to contend fall out and all of a sudden realize maybe their problems go a bit deeper than one bad season, now all of a sudden you might have some guys that you didn't think would be available at the trade deadline. So the availability and the market around a guy like Stafford, I think, is completely dictated by similar players that are not available at the deadline and what the price of those players are.
Now, as you mentioned, you did come to Buffalo. You did a story on the Sabres upcoming this season. And the last question I have for you today before we let you go, it kind of goes along with that story. How big of a misstep do you think it will be for the Buffalo Sabres organization if they don't land Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel?
Well, it's going to set him back a bit. The good news, obviously, is that before Darcy was fired, he wound up, getting this giant war chest of picks and prospects and stuff that obviously puts them on pretty good footing as far as trying to build for the future. But the building is expedited by grabbing one of those guys, and he's, if you're the Sabres, you're kind of open for it. I mean, I don't know how to make it happen. Obviously, the draft rules kind of have almost penalized some of the worst teams in the league versus previous seasons. But there's no question that if you look around the league right now at the teams that need to rebuild and what they need, the Sabres are obviously top of the list as far as they need some guy to build around that isn't currently on the roster.
Yeah, the one thing I'm going to tell you before I let you go, just for your future reference, keep an eye out this season because I've noticed, obviously being around Sabres fans a lot more than you are, we've become very open to the idea that while Connor McDavid would be nice, they were the worst team in hockey last year, and everybody in Buffalo is convinced that if the Sabres finish dead last again, they're not going to get the first overall pick. So a lot of people have become very open to just finishing in the bottom 2. Just make sure you get one of those kids. And I think that's kind of interesting, but it's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea at all. And I don't think it's, when the Sabres are as bad as they were last year and when there isn't a clear path back to contention without grabbing one of those kids, I'd have no problem with it if I was a Sabres fan. Let's
just make sure that Ted Nolan does not ruin any of these young kids before they get the chance to make an impact in the National Hockey League.
Indeed.
Well, hey, Greg, thank you for joining us today. As mentioned before, Greg Wyshynski, the editor of the Puck Daddy blog on Yahoo Sports, the host of the Merrick vs. Wyshynski podcast, which can be heard on iTunes. And make sure you give him a follow at Wyshynski on Twitter. Thanks again, Greg, for joining us today, and look forward to talking to you sometime this season.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Take care.
A successful product does not become a successful product on its own. Look at the Gear Radio Network, for example. We're a prime example. We had a lot of help getting here, and we can help you get where you want to go to. Advertising rates are very low to start off here on the Gear Radio Network. Visit us at gearnetwork.com. Click on the contact link to send us an email, and we can work out the details. Again, advertise your product across all of the forums at a low rate here on the Gear Radio Network.
So you've thought about getting home security, but you've not pulled the trigger on it for some reason. Maybe it's the price, maybe it's the pesky salespeople that come and knock on your door. But fortunately, Gear Network and Better Live Than Dead have partnered with the ADT home security systems and can help you avoid those issues and save you some money in the process while gaining the peace of mind of knowing that you are protecting your home with the #1 security system. ADT is one of today's most trusted and well-known brands in the security industry and currently serves more than 6 million customers, making them the largest company of their kind in both the United States and Canada. Their broad, pioneering set of products and services, from interactive home and business solutions to home health services, meet a range of customer needs for today's active and increasingly mobile lifestyles. Visit gearnetwork.com/BLTD and click on the banner to save 20% on equipment and installation for any ADT security systems. You can also call 877-811-3616 and mention the promo code A152736 to receive the discount. ADT via Gear Network, security for your home and security for your life. Do you enjoy listening to Better Live Than Dead, but you're not always by your laptop to hear it on GearNetwork.com? Not to worry, we've got you covered. Better Live Than Dead and all other Gear Network podcasts can now be heard on iHeartRadio, iTunes, in the Zune Marketplace, on SoundCloud, Spreaker, Stitcher Radio, and on TuneIn Radio. So make sure you get one of the aforementioned apps to stay up to date with the latest Gear Network podcasts. Welcome back to the Better Live Than Dead podcast. Joining us on the line right now, the one, the only, Mr. Perez. How you doing today, bud?
Hey, man. What's going on, people? You know, I'm doing all right. On my way out to a Oktoberfest to drink some beer and smoke some cigars.
Well, hey, I'm glad this time when we got you on the phone, I forgot to ask before we got on, but I kind of figured that you weren't in a car wash this time.
No, not this time. Not this time. This time I'm actually driving.
Well, hey, keep your eyes on the road and don't pay too much attention to everyone else, because I need you. Give me 100% on this podcast. So.
Well, hey, if you're listening to this and you hear me say I'm driving, understand I don't have the phone up to my ear. I have a Bluetooth in, so I'm driving as safe as I can be while in the car, while speaking with you.
It's almost like we're
audience.
It's almost like we're embedded into your brain right now.
Exactly.
Well, hey, looking at the National Football League, as you know, last segment we talked hockey, so we got to change it up, talk some football now. The big news out of the National Football League this week was the Buffalo Bills benching E.J. Manuel. Kyle Orton will start this weekend against the Detroit Lions. Perez, what are your thoughts on this? Not necessarily shocking, but certainly a shakeup in Buffalo.
I'm not really surprised. I think it was just a matter of time. E.J. Manuel's young. He has a lot he still needs to learn. He still has to get some of the fundamentals down. I think he'll be a good quarterback later on when he gets some more of the fundamentals down, but he's not like an Andrew Luck type player where you come off the draft and you start and you make a splash. He has good solid rudimentary building blocks, but he just wasn't ready to take the reins of a team.
The one thing that really stuck out to me this week was when Sammy Watkins mentioned that just having Kyle Orton in practice and realizing that Orton throws the ball, he gets the ball to the wide receivers faster, can hit him in stride, where Manuel kind of struggled with that. That might be something to look at, where Manuel's delivery may be a little too long. because we do know he did struggle getting the ball to the wide receivers. He kind of lacks some downfield accuracy and strength. But the one thing that was interesting to me was that with this being the last game of the Ralph Wilson, this should be the last game of the Ralph Wilson ownership under the Buffalo Bills. I totally got lost there with my words. I have no idea why, but after this week, next week, I think it's the 8th of October, Terry Pegula should be unanimously voted in as the new owner of the Buffalo Bills. And that brings me to my next point of why Kyle Orton is starting out over E.J. Manuel. Nobody's job is safe in Buffalo right now. When there's a new boss in town, you've got a clean slate. So if you continue to play E.J. Manuel this season, knowing full on that he will not give your team the best chance to win, it certainly appears that Doug Marrone putting Kyle Orton at the helm of the Buffalo Bills is not only the best for business, but best for him, best for Doug Whaley, because, well, we all know if they come out the rest of the season and just lay an egg with Manuel under center, they certainly could be out of a job next offseason.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think EJ just needs to grow. Got to remember, he's still young. He just needs to grow. He may not be learning at the pace that the Buffalo Bills would like, but quarterback in the NFL, for as much as they protect the quarterbacks and baby the quarterbacks nowadays, it's still a tough job. So I don't see anyone getting fired, but stranger things have happened, so you never know.
Well, the one thing about it is that
I'll be honest with you. I just like the fact that, obviously, if people don't know where we're from upstate New York, where there's a lot of Buffalo Bill fans, and the first 2 games of the year, people were like, oh, my God, this is Buffalo's year. Yay, go Bills. And I was like, give it time. They do this every year, and sure enough, here we go.
You actually did say that on the podcast. I do remember that happening.
Hey.
Have to dig back through the archives and get the sound clip for that one, but
I know how to call it. Just look at my picks for last week.
It's just interesting to me that Doug Marrone flat out said, this is my decision and my decision only. I didn't have to overrule anybody upstairs. I wanted to change at quarterback, so I made the change. It almost seems to me like Doug Marrone has decided, E.J. Manuel needs to sit and learn. Kyle Orton gives us our best chance to win. Even if Kyle Orton doesn't play great, Kyle Orton not being great is still better than E.J. Manuel being good. Or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, no, I agree. This isn't my team, the Dallas Cowboys, where Jerry Jones basically has the final say of everything. They tend to run their team like an actual team, where the head coach has a very large part in what's going on. I don't care for the Bills, but they have that part correct.
Well, now that we're done talking about the Buffalo Bills, I want to move over to another team in the AFC East, the New England Patriots. What is going on in Foxborough this season with the Patriots? It seems as if Tom Brady is, I don't know if he's regressing or it's just that his offensive line is so bad and his weapons are just not there, and it's making him look like he's regressing. But something is going on in New England. What do you think is going on over there?
I don't know. Tom Brady's kind of looked like Stevie Wonder throwing the football. I mean, he's just not hitting anybody. It's like he can't see his wide open receivers. But his line is kind of weak. They were dominant for so long that I think they kind of been resting on their laurels, and they haven't really made any great improvements to the offense. They've made good improvements to the defense, but their offense is kind of stagnant, and it's starting to show. And frankly, the hoodie, he's getting a little old. It might be time for him to, consider going different pastures.
Well, looking at it from my point of view, it just seems to me as if you've got Gronkowski, who clearly isn't 100%. You've got an offensive line that can't protect the quarterback. You're giving Tom Brady no time to throw the ball. And look at the wide receivers. Look at the wide receivers he's got. 2 of the top wide receivers he had last year, Aaron Dobson and Kenbrell Tompkins, have been benched. Yep. Like I said, Gronkowski's not 100%. You're not giving him time to get the ball out to make an accurate throw, and the defense hasn't been that great either. So
Gronkowski hasn't been healthy in years.
Well, yeah, but he's coming back from a knee injury. He's coming back from a severe knee injury, so it's going to take some time for him to get healthy. But it seemed like he was getting healthy, and then all of a sudden it just kind of seemed like he stopped and was just slow again.
Yeah, but that's been his MO for the last couple of years. Last year, he was coming back from an arm thing, and then the year before that, he was coming back from a back thing.
Well, the arm
thing hurt.
The arm thing was because the doctor who performed the surgery did not appear to know what he was doing. While he was a very good doctor, he seemed to have screwed the surgery up just a couple times. And the back thing, we all know that's from college. He had a bad back in college, which is why if Gronkowski was healthy, he would have been a top 10 pick for sure. But because he had the back injury,
if Gronkowski was healthy, he'd be a beast.
But because he had the back injury out of college, they just, a lot of people crossed him off the board because they said, with his back injury, he'll be a 6 or 7, maybe 8-year player in the NFL. But it's looking now like if we get half of what Rob Gronkowski used to be, we'll be lucky. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Moving over now to the a new segment we mentioned last week that we discussed throughout the podcast. We actually took some time during the week and figured it out, but we're going to be making some picks, and a little fancy thing to pass along to you are Week 5 NFL picks on the Gear Radio Network. Myself, Perez, and John, or JC Money, as some of you may know him. Our picks will be brought to you by FanDuel, where you can play in a 1-week fantasy league with the chance to instantly earn money. And I got to tell you what, check it out, man. It's a great way to win a lot of money for doing something so easy. So looking right now at the Thursday night football game, it already has taken place, but the picks were in before then, and we all had Green Bay, and why not? I mean, Minnesota is
that was a massacre.
For lack of a better term, they're just not a good football team. But looking at the games on Sunday and Monday, all of us, we have Atlanta, New Orleans, Indianapolis, Dallas, Chicago, San Diego, Cincinnati, and Seattle winning across the board. The first game we're going to talk about, Cleveland and Tennessee. Myself and John have Cleveland. Perez, you have Tennessee. Tell me why.
Let me ask you a question real quick before I answer that question.
Shoot.
Let me ask you a question.
Shoot.
How'd you do last week on the picks that we discussed?
I don't remember because I don't think I have them. I think John has them, so I'll have to get back to you on that one.
No, the picks that we did on air.
Oh, I didn't double check. Probably bad. I'm pretty sure I pulled 0 for 2.
Yeah, you went 0 for 2.
Yeah, so I thought.
You know what I did?
Let me guess. You went 2-0?
I went 2-0.
Oh, congrats. So that's why you picked Tennessee?
I'm picking Tennessee because I think that they're just a slightly better ball team than Cleveland. I don't really think, while Cleveland's looked decent, I think Tennessee is going to have a pretty decent week against them. I just don't like Cleveland. I think Tennessee is going to pull this one out. I'm going with my gut on this one.
Okay, I feel comfortable with the Cleveland Browns. They have a better quarterback than the Tennessee Titans do, and I just think they'll pull this one out. Again, it's a gut thing. You just look at it and you say, hey, you know what? I've got Cleveland. But the next pick that you have, Perez, is interesting because you have selected the St. Louis Rams to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Please humor me.
You know what? I got to be honest with you. I kind of felt like the picks that we're making were kind of obvious, like across the board. I was like, yeah, these picks that I'm making, I think everyone would make the same picks on who's going to win and who's going to lose. So when it came up to the Cleveland Rams, I'm sorry, not the Cleveland Rams. That'd be a weird team. The St. Louis Rams and who are they playing?
Philly.
Yeah. When it came to that,
pay attention. I just said it.
I know you did, but I'm sorry. I'm looking for a parking spot. Hey, look, there's a parking spot. I kind of felt like I could see St. Louis finally doing something against this game. Because if you look at Philly, their defense isn't that great, and the Rams have an okay offense. I don't know. I just kind of feel like Philly's going to fall down.
Well, it's an interesting point because, and sorry to cut you off because I did want to point these stats out. St. Louis is 9th in the NFL with 368.3 yards of total offense per game. Philadelphia is 10th with 367.5. So if anything, it's going to be an offensive game. But the thing that stands out to me, which is why I feel comfortable picking the Eagles, is that Philadelphia has scored 122 points, or an average of 30.5 points per game, where the Rams have scored 56 points in 3 games, an average of 18.7 points per game. So while the offense will be there, I certainly think Philadelphia will do enough to win the game.
No, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I almost changed my pick. I kind of picked the Rams just because I kind of wanted to pick something that was kind of off the board, something that no one would really see. I think if I look deep into my heart, I feel like Philly's going to win the game. But I'm going to stick with my pick just because I'd like to see the Rams upset them because I don't like Philly.
Speaking of sticking with your pick, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars defeating the Pittsburgh Steelers, while JC and myself have Pittsburgh winning. Now, did you pick Jacksonville because of the way Pittsburgh played last week against the Buccaneers?
Well, yes. That's one of the reasons why I picked them. And I tend to kind of pick against Pittsburgh anyway. Not always, but a lot of times.
Fair enough.
I don't think Pittsburgh's in a position. I think you're going to see Pittsburgh really struggle the rest of the year. Their offense is pretty much horrible. Big Ben's not looking that great. Troy Polamalu's looking old on defense. Their defense isn't looking good.
Their whole defense is looking old.
Oh yeah, I don't think that they're going to muster much in way of beating these guys.
Now, moving on to the next game, you and JC have Denver. I have Arizona. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is my taking a shot in the dark pick because we talked about it a few weeks ago. The Arizona Cardinals have surprised. I tried to say shocked and surprised at the same time. It didn't work so well. They have surprised, and we could say they've shocked the NFL with their undefeated performance so far this season with Carson Palmer and Drew Stanton at quarterback. Who'd have thunk it? But whatever works, I guess. But I just have a feeling with Denver coming out of the bye week and Arizona on a roll, this might be one of those games where Arizona can catch fire and beat Denver. I mean, they did it last week against the 49ers. You know, what's not to say they can't do it again this week against the Broncos?
I don't even think this game is going to be close. I think Denver's going to spank the Cardinals. Right, I mean, the Cardinals have come out of left field. Like, no one expected them to be 3-0 at this point going into the season. And I think it's kind of a fluke. I think Denver's going to hurt them.
Hey, fair enough. Like I always say, that's why we got a podcast. That's why we got opinions. But we'll find out, and we'll make sure to talk a little more about it next week. But moving on to the next game, you and John have Kansas City defeating the 49ers. I have the 49ers. And for the sole reason of last week, the 49ers were not necessarily embarrassed by the Cardinals, but when you say Arizona versus San Francisco, you expect San Francisco to win. They didn't. They faltered and fell, obviously, to the Cardinals. I think this week it'll be different. The 49ers will do enough to win the game. They'll stand up. They'll kind of dust themselves off and show the NFL that they still can win football games, despite the fact that they are not as good of a football team as they've been in past years. I still think the 49ers can take Kansas City, although, to your credit, Perez, and to John's credit as well, Kansas City did truck the Patriots on Monday Night Football, so they may still be riding high off that. So it probably will end up being a close game, but I have a feeling Kansas City will fall to the 49ers. Like I said, though, it'll be close.
I think it's going to be a close game. They both have really, really good offenses. But, like you said, you saw what they did to the Patriots last week. And I think that they're going to still be riding that. And I think they're going to shock the 49ers. And normally I would probably go with someone – I would go with a team like the 49ers over Kansas City normally. But after last week's offensive display, I think Kansas City has found their stride. And I think the 49ers are in trouble.
Well, as we mentioned before in the season prediction of the podcast, I think we all predicted Kansas City to make the playoffs because of just how good they were last year. And they've come out of the gate, they fell flat, and they finally showed us – or they finally showed some signs of life last week. I don't want to say they showed us who they were because it's only one game, so you got to give them a few more weeks, a few more performances, but they certainly showed some signs of life on Monday night. So while I can see why you would pick Kansas City, like I said, I'm sticking with San Francisco. Now, moving on to the final game that we're going to predict this week. And I know you're going to throw jabs at me, but I don't want to hear it. I've got good reasoning behind why I did this. You and John have Detroit. I have Buffalo. Now, hear me out on this one really quick. First off, new quarter.
Buffalo.
Yes, I'm going to smack you. I'm going to come to Fairport, smack you, and steal some cigars while I'm at it. But the Buffalo Bills have Kyle Orton under center this week. Kyle Orton is 4-0 in his career against the Detroit Lions. The offense will be reinvigorated because there is a new quarterback, so there's something to rally around now. Last week they were very defeated, hanging their heads because they should have beat the Texans last week, but E.J. Manuel apparently enjoys throwing the ball directly to J.J. Watt, it really just cost them the game at that point. But Kyle Orton under center, like I said, offense will be reinvigorated. And on defense, which I think will be most important, while Kyle Williams may miss the game with a knee injury, take a wild guess who the defensive coordinator of the Bills is. Oh, that's right, the old head coach of the Detroit Lions. It's his first game back in Detroit since they fired him last offseason. So I can guarantee you that defense and Jim Schwartz will be fired up, and they're going to want to rally around their guy, and they're going to want to make a statement, which is why I picked the Buffalo Bills to defeat the Detroit Lions. Plus, the Detroit Lions are without I just had a tongue twister there. Joy Bell and Calvin Johnson may be limited. As last week we saw, he was only a decoy, catching only a few passes for minuscule amount of yards. They say that may happen again this week because his ankle injury is still bothersome. So that offense will be held down just a little. So I just, again, it's one of those gut picks. I mean, I know you're going to say because I'm a Bills fan and whatever you want to say, but
you said that last week when I picked Dallas. You just figured
Dallas
out because you're a Dallas fan.
Dallas is doing something good. And hey, just for the record, I picked Dallas this week too. So damn it, let me pick the Bills because
no, you can pick the Bills. Feel free to pick the Bills.
Good thing you're out of my house.
The Kyle Orton, two things happen when a new quarterback starts. One of two things. Either they gel quickly and the offense looks like they've been playing together forever, or the wide receivers, the running backs, tight ends, they're not used to the new quarterback yet, and you can tell there's confusion on the field. I think that's what's going to happen. I think there's going to be confusion on the field. I don't think they're going to be in sync. I think they're going to mess up on the littlest things, and I think Detroit's going to use that to pull out a win.
Well, hey, you know what? If nothing else, man, you've got good reasoning behind your pick, and that's all I can ask for.
And then when that happens, when the Buffalo Bills lose, I'm going to say on Facebook to all my Buffalo friends, ha-ha. But on the reverse of that, if they win, I'll keep my mouth shut.
If they win, you'll give me $5. I'm kidding. I don't even. Okay, let's go Buffalo. Free cigars for the Wolfensteiner on a podcast. I would say we'll have a podcast sometime. We'll just smoke cigars and we'll make fun of each other's favorite football teams. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Speaking of cigars, I think I will let you go because I know you're busy.
I'm at the venue now, sitting outside. I gotta go drink some beers and smoke some cigars. Woo!
All right. Enjoy your evening. Go sell some cigars. Make yourself look good. I'm going to throw this bad boy to commercial break when we get back. I will be alone to wrap this podcast up. Thank you, Perez, again for joining us, and hopefully you are incorrect in all of your picks because I'm thinking maybe we can get some sort of little trophy or something for the Gear Network Better Live Than Dead football pick'em or something like that. We'll talk about it later, but look for that down.
Do it.
It should only cost like $15 so we can make it happen.
Let's do it.
But again, that was our NFL pick segment. Kind of sloppy, but who gives a damn? We do what we want.
We're just having fun. We're just having fun with it.
Exactly, man. Week 5 NFL picks brought to you by FanDuel. As I said, check them out, FanDuel.com. Thank you, Perez, again for joining us. Have a great night. We'll talk to you next week, and we will be back right after these commercial breaks.
Listen in, people.
This free and independent sportscast is made possible when you shop the Gear Network store through Amazon. Visit GearNetwork.com and click on the Amazon banner to shop through Amazon's thousands of products at great prices delivered right to your front door. Again, that's GearNetwork.com and click the Amazon banner at the top.
Hey, gear guys and gals. You hear that song in the background? Yes, that, my friends, is You Are Undeniable by Mos Def featuring Marvin Gaye, and I purchased that from my iPhone using Gear Network on iTunes. That's right. iTunes is not only a destination for our podcast, but now you can go there for all your app, music, podcast, and video needs. Anything you want from the App Store, you can get via the Gear Network iTunes connection. Here's what you do. Go to GearNetwork.com and click on Support the Shows and click on the iTunes link. It will take you to our page and you'll be able to access iTunes from there and make your purchases as you normally would. The difference is Apple throws us a little something to help with the productions when you purchase through the Gear Store, and this will help keep the podcast free and independent. Again, that's GearNetwork.com, and don't forget the Amazon page as well to shop for the iPod or iPhone to play these apps on. One more time, that's GearNetwork.com. Check out all our other shows on the Gear Network as well while you are there.
Gear Network listeners, how's your golf game doing? On a scale from 1 to Tiger Woods, are you Charles Barkley? Not to worry, our friends at Pure Point Golf can help you. Pure Point Golf is not the typical way that you may think of golf instruction. They are not your average pro at a local neighborhood range or course. Pure Point is more than that. They have developed an innovative system of golf instruction that will change your game. Pure Point's system has worked for more than 55,000 golfers all over the world, and they know that it will work for you too. With their money-back guarantee, you have nothing to lose by giving it a try. If you're ready to up your golf game, visit GearNetwork.com and scroll over to the banner Support the Shows and click on Friends of Gear to find the banner for Pure Point Golf. Remember, there is a money-back guarantee, and any purchase that you make through Gear Network's link helps support the shows, keeps the cost of production down, and keeps this and many other of our podcasts free. Head over to GearNetwork.com and help us help out your golf game. We are back on the Better Live Than Dead podcast. Thank you again for joining us this week. I got to say thanks to Greg Wyshynski, Puck Daddy blog on Yahoo Sports, for joining us this week in the interview segment. Thanks to Mr. Perez for taking time out of his very busy schedule to join me on the phone to talk some National Football League and make our weekly picks. Thank you to John for allowing this podcast to happen, as well as sending me your NFL picks this week. Thanks to Tony at Fortune Studios for making a podcast sound great. And thank you to every single one of you listening to the podcast this week, wherever it may be, online, on your phone, on your laptop, wherever it is. I want to say thank you for tuning in. We are Better Live Than Dead. You are not. Sam, we'll try better next week, my friends. Thanks again for joining us.